Every year, politicians warn, if we want to guarantee America's food supply, we have to save the family farm. And to do that, they want your money.
Lawmakers in Washington have passed a new farm bill.
In 2008, Congress passed another $300 billion farm bill.
We cannot turn back, not with an economy to fix and farms to save.
Family farms, small farms are important.
And I don't think we want anybody in this country to starve.
People would starve?
They go out of business, then they'd be forced to move elsewhere and find different jobs.
Well, that's not starving, that's finding a different job.
But if they don't have a job, then they're going to starve.
Farm subsidies rarely go to poor people. The average farmer makes twice what the average American earns. Yet Nebraska politicians want more.
We need to get farmers a better safety net here.
If you're a politician from Nebraska and you want to get elected, Republican or Democrat, the way to do that is to say, I support farm subsidies.
Yeah, crazy system. It's left over from the 1930s, left over from the Depression, and it's a great example of how nothing is as permanent as a temporary government program.
There is one country that has abolished farm subsidies, New Zealand. There were riots and protests when they did that. Farmers said, we'll go bankrupt. People said, we'll starve. But it didn't happen. In fact, farm productivity quintupled. Agriculture there has boomed once they got people off the dole. Instead of sucking up to you politicians, they found ways to be more efficient as farmers.
I don't have many farmers sucking up. I do have them coming in and thanking me for allowing their family farm to survive.
Clothing and shelter are important too. Why don't we subsidize them? If this works so well, why don't we just subsidize everything?
Democrats and Republicans are currently warring over the Farm Bill, but despite that partisan bickering, there's actually one thing that they do agree on. It's the sugar subsidy, a decades-long program that helps U.S. growers by driving sugar prices up, well, artificially. Preferential treatment for U.S. sugar dates all the way back to 1789, when the government started taxing imported sugar. The subsidy for U.S. growers came in 1934 during the Great Depression. That's when the government put quotas on imports and started paying farmers directly for the sugar they produced. Almost 80 years later, sugar policy remains a sweet deal for the industry. And it gets sweeter. If farmers can't sell their sugar, they're allowed to exchange the crop for a government loan that they technically don't have to pay back. The government can then sell that surplus sugar to ethanol producers. And industry lobbyists argue that means the program doesn't cost taxpayers anything. But every now and then, the math gets sticky. This year, taxpayers are on the hook for $280 million. So why the bipartisan agreement on sugar? Well, it all comes down to one small but influential lobbying group. In the last 5 years, the sugar industry spent $49 million in federal campaign donations and lobbying, more than any other crop sector except tobacco.
With the prices of corn, wheat, and oats soaring over the past 6 months, farm economy is certainly on a solid footing right now. With all the talk in Washington about drastic spending cuts, should ag subsidies, which total approximately $20 billion a year, be targeted?
These programs are regressive because the average farm household income is higher than the average U.S. taxpayer household income. They're costly, as you say. They cost us up to, 20s of billions of dollars a year. They are distortive. They flow overwhelmingly to just 5 what they call program crops, and most of those subsidies go to the biggest producers of those costs. They also have harmful flow-on effects to not only exporters abroad who suffer because of the lower world prices brought on by the overproduction, but also other U.S. exporters who would gain from, say, a successful conclusion to the Doha round, which is being held up partly, not solely, but partly because of the U.S. desire to hold on to these programs. The best way to guarantee food supply in this country, as anywhere else, is to keep markets open. That way, food can flow from where it's plentiful to where it is scarce, and that includes in times of, yes, bad weather.
What about that, David?
One example of one reason why we have to have farm programs in the United States.
Sally.
I can produce against any producer in the world, but I cannot compete against foreign countries. I cannot compete against foreign treasuries.